Hey, it's showtime. Welcome to another rousing adventure of Chill Skills Sporlan Tech Talks. Thank you for joining us today. Looks like we got quite a crowd out there considering it's almost summertime. Broadcasting live, it's the Jim and John show. You like that, John?
I do. Yeah, great.
We were planning to broadcast. What the heck? We were planning to broadcast live from the AHR Expo in Atlanta. However, that didn't quite work out like we had hoped.
Not exactly.
So instead, we're here in Washington, Missouri, broadcasting live from Sporlan headquarters in our studio called the Zoom Room with our fancy new equipment. You can see some of that here.
That's right.
Now.
Headphones.
Yeah, headphones. Doesn't look like Bill and Ted in your basement anymore.
No, it still has that feel, but not the look.
Not the look. Well, looks notwithstanding. This is a recorded webinar. John, did I say recorded?
Did you?
Yeah, I did.
Recorded?
It's recorded.
It's recorded.
This webinar will be recorded and it will be posted out on our site for your viewing pleasure. That way you can watch it over and over again if you're having trouble sleeping at night. This is our first formal training video for the so-called cold room control, or CRC.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe, if you're lucky, we'll even do another webinar on this contraption if this one goes over well. And if that's the case, then we really should have called this part one, because we'd call that one
Okay, part two.
Part two.
Yeah. Well, we'll just do an implied part one on this one.
Fair enough. And here's a shameless promotion for the next webinar. In approximately some yet to be determined number of weeks, we'll post part 4 of the series of webinars on the S3C case control. Have faith, it'll happen. And it might be a good idea if you're interested in watching that to go back and watch parts 1, 2, and 3 on the S3C, just saying, because it's out there on YouTube and
Prerequisite watching.
probably be a good idea, because we're going to talk about case startup, control systems, and all that kind of good stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Hello, I'm Jim Jansen, Senior Application Engineer. That's me on the left, but considering that we're streaming live these days, this is kind of irrelevant, but joining me today is my longest running co-host, John Whithouse. John's a Senior Principal Engineer for the Sporlan Division. He's a published author, consultant. As I've said many times in the past, all around extra smart guy. John's a big deal around here. We're really happy to have him. Say hi, John.
Good afternoon, everyone.
I'm just a Senior Application Engineer, which means I got a lot of gray hair and I've been here long. In the room today, because she never likes me mentioning this, is Phyllis. She's our Communications Director. She tells us what to do, and every once in a while we'll pay attention to that.
Sometimes.
Yeah, she sets things up, and we're really glad to have her doing that, because I don't like doing that one bit. Here's the contact information specifically for the cold room control. Once it's been formally released, launched, and all that good stuff, there's the number to call. And I'll even see if I can turn on the little laser pointer here. John, can you see the laser pointer?
I can indeed.
See, it says S3C contact number, but that's going to be the same contact number for both the CRC and the S3C. And you got it, the same overworked tech support folks who keep the S3C rolling along are going to help with the CRC after it's formally launched. Take a look at the details that we've got, the days and the times that we man this support coverage. Now, if you need help on our legacy products or for any of your other AC or refrigeration flow control needs for those products, you can get a hold of our tech support. And best way to do it is to call the tech support number.
And that number is
636-392-3906 or
email.
Email works too.
Tech support, SVD, tech support at parker.com.
Now, just for a short review, the S3C, because the CRC is related to the S3C, I've not managed to say that correctly now multiple times. The S3C is a standalone case control. John, what does standalone mean?
In this case, standalone means that it can function without being connected to the building's automation system.
Oh, you'll hear the term standalone with respect to the CRC as this webinar progresses. That standalone thing is a really neat feature, but that's not all. What else?
Well, it can be connected to the building's automation system. It just doesn't have to be. So you can have communication.
So does that mean
from the CRC?
Does that mean it's got an open protocol?
It does indeed,
as opposed to a closed one.
Yep.
And so what does that do for you?
Well, It can be beneficial for monitoring purposes,
Okay.
automated alarming and things like that.
Okay.
And it can communicate via the two most common control methods out there, which would be BACnet or Modbus.
Modbus. Okay, so I always kind of make fun of this sometimes, but the three S's in the S3C case control systems name stand for
Safety, service, and security.
So not safety third.
No, not safety
Okay.
third. No,
Maybe-
safety first. Not
Should we call it the C3S? Not so much.
maybe.
But keep in mind, there is seriously a lot of similarity between the S3C and the CRC, which is kind of a neat thing. The cold room control, or the CRC, if you will, provides control, of course, monitoring and service support for refrigerated cold rooms. Now, the CRC is not to be confused with cyclic redundancy check, colorectal check, or ASHRAE chapter regional conference. Simply
No, just simply cold
room control. John, what just exactly is a cold room?
Well, typically we're talking about.
And I'm not talking about our offices here in the wintertime.
Okay.
All
right. I'll leave that part out.
All right, very nice.
So typically, we're talking about walk-in freezers and coolers. It could be something like a prep room as well, potentially. But typically, we're talking about walk-in freezers and coolers.
So it's a cold room consisting of a refrigeration system that circulates air through an enclosed area designed to maintain perishable food or beverages or any of a number of different products that require low temperature storage. It could be cool or frozen.
That's correct.
It does this all while utilizing either a single compressor or a compressor that might possibly be in a rack system. Now, keep in mind, utilizing this control in conjunction with compressors in a rack is still somewhat under development, but it's on the way.
Yes.
Now, that's not to be confused with complete rack control.
No, this is not a rack controller. This is a controller for the cold room.
Now, something to also note here, we've got the very familiar display module, or DM, and the cold room control, the CRC, is interactive with this fancy thing, the Sporlan Tech Check app, just like the S3C. Pretty neat. Now let's review this slide here. The cold room control, the CRC, both standalone and rack compressors, manages walk-in cold rooms, single coil, self-contained, remote rack capability coming along, reduced installation costs, and we'll talk a little bit more about that coming up. Improved energy efficiency through accurate valve control.
Correct.
The cold room control manages walk-in coolers and freezers, and it works by collecting data from both the room and the refrigeration system. So how do we do that, John?
Okay. So the CRC uses temperature and pressure information. So there are temperature sensor and pressure transducer installs that go along with this.
Sure.
And the CRC can use that information to actuate a stepper motor valve or or sometimes an SPW type valve or solenoid type valve to allow the ideal amount of refrigerant into the evaporator coil.
You know what? That sounds like one more good way to use a Sporlan control along with a Sporlan valve.
It does sound that way, doesn't it?
I think that's pretty neat. Now, the CRC is a standalone solution capable of controlling an individual control. Boy, listen to
An
me.
individual.
I've been talking
That's
for
what-
longer
that's what-
than this morning,
That's what you
but
meant to say, is
it
it?
doesn't sound like it, does it? Now, there are two versions. The board and display module without the enclosure, which could be sold directly to like an equipment manufacturer. The equipment manufacturer or OEM would install that board inside the sheet metal housing shell of their equipment along with the display module. And that's what we're showing right here. Or we can sell the cold room control, the CRC, with an enclosure. And here is a version of the enclosure. And we can sell this to whoever wants the darn thing within, whoever's got an account set up with us. So those are the two versions. Now, if we come over here and look at some of these main board specs, we got power input with voltage specified, We've got other inputs. John, you've already talked a little bit about some of these from the
Yes.
analog inputs ranging from temperature and such. And then we've got outputs, which could be used to drive and control various things. And then we've got network communication capabilities and one Ethernet connection at this point. One Ethernet. Now, here's something really neat. It's built to operate in the refrigerated space, this minus 30C to plus 50C. John, you know what kind of temperatures are those in terms of Fahrenheit?
You're going to make me do those conversions in my head.
Do you happen to know those numbers?
Let's see, minus 30C, that would be minus 22F.
Oh, look at you go.
And plus 50C, gosh, plus 122F.
Oh, come on, really? So that means I bet that, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit, that you could put this thing inside the cold room.
Though technically we have to say if it was 122 degrees F, we don't think we would call it a cold room anymore.
Yeah, well, maybe not. Now, let's review this slide. We got a multitude of sensory inputs and controlled outputs. John, can you walk us through some of these?
All right, so up on your upper left-hand corner, you have the Ethernet port.
Okay.
Then the next connectors down would be for the display module.
Okay. What else we got?
Then you have inputs for a pressure transducer, up to 3 temperature sensors. You have those universal inputs. And then you have an output for a stepper motor, as a stepper motor operated valve, as we said. Then we have defrost
All part of the
outputs. And then you have solenoid type outputs and also fans over on the right-hand side of the board. That's what those two
Look at that.
solenoid looking devices are, because those are solenoids. And then you have your power input up at the top in the middle.
Good deal. Now, let's take a look at this. Here's the prototype enclosure. This enclosure will be an optional feature. Now, we didn't have it at AHR in case you looked around trying to see it. I have one of 2 versions of this that actually exist at the current time. We intend to provide this enclosure for future full production applications. This enclosure is approximately 8 inches wide across here. It's about 15 inches long. And I think this cover here, this is about 3 inches deep or so, something like that. And this thing weighs about 3.5 pounds. It's fairly light. Yep. You see, we got the board mounted in here with the display module on the front. Now, this part's a big deal. Our goal is to have egress protection X5, which means low pressure water jet resistance. This means the display could withstand a direct hit from a low pressure stream of water. I think. And that applies to the display module when installed on a flat surface, like when you clean the equipment or whatever. That can come in pretty handy.
So as you can see from the inside of the lid in this photo here, you have a gasket in there.
Oh, is that what that thing is?
Helps to have a gasket on that edge, on that perimeter.
So yeah, maybe so. Yeah.
That helps to that's what gives it the ingress protection.
If you recall, the S3C didn't like that water stream one bit.
No, it does not.
Yeah.
Boards themselves do not like that.
And then you got the actual circuit board in here, so it's protected. And we intend to have that X5 rating once the enclosed version enters full production.
Correct.
Now, for test purposes, for alpha tests, prototype applications, we're planning to provide this metallic enclosure. Ingress protection here should also be X5. We do have some openings, side cutouts with the appropriate conduits connected. You should have good moisture resistance there as well. And again, can't quite see it as well, but that has a gasket around the perimeter here also. This enclosure, a little bit different size, six inches wide, 13.5 inches long, about 4.5 inches deep, and it's a tad bit heavier at 8.5 pounds. We're currently looking for prototype store locations, big box, little box, any kind of box, store sizes. Right, let us know. For production quantities, if you do have what you would consider production quantities and a need for this, you could contact your Sporlan field sales engineer. Hopefully you know who they are. Now, they might not be able to answer every single question about this product line, but go ahead and contact them anyway. You know, if nothing else, you can talk about Zoom lock for 3 hours.
That's right.
Now, that's a good thing. Now, let's review these bullet points here on the CRC board. This is the OEM factory installed version. So it could be factory installed actually in the evaporator. All sensors are factory installed and wired, you know, all of these different versions. Fan and defrost heaters, valve is factory installed and wired. And you can see as we're going down through this, there is some considerable savings associated with that. You know, it'd be factory tested, minimizing the amount of wiring that would be required. You got one power, one communication connection, and the onboard 12-volt power supply. The power supply on board converts the building power, 120 or 240 volt AC, to the required control requirements. What are those control requirements, John? You know offhand?
It's 12 volt DC.
So I bet there's no additional external power supply required after you do that. You kind of need that on an S3C though, I understand.
Yes, you do.
Now, for some of you astute souls out there that remember the S3C Part 1 webinar, you may recall that the S3C product line is supplemented with this convenient panel. It's suitable for use with walk-in coolers and freezers as well. And it's even called the so-called walk-in panel. Hey, John, why don't you open that door a little bit more so we can see inside the door?
Okay, here, let me make a click. Oh,
look at you go.
You clicked it before I could.
Yeah, that's better. That's better. The panel includes the case control, the valve module, the display module on the exterior of the panel cover, that is, fan breaker, relay, defrost relay, and many other components, all factory mounted, ready to go in a handy enclosure with a wiring schematic and parts list and all. The only downside to this is you gotta install it outside the cold room.
Yep.
And you got to keep that in mind with this. We will continue to provide the existing walk-in panel, provided customers continue to buy it. Now, here's some S3C installation process details, you know, about how to mount the panel and that you got to run power wire through conduit from breakers to the panel and run power from the panel to the evaporator and install all the sensors and run through the conduit and run the valve wiring to the board and run the communication wires from the panel to the panel. You know, it's a little bit involved, right? It takes some time to do all that.
There's a fair amount of installation involved.
And you got to mount it on the outside of the cold room. See, we got a walk-in cooler freezer plan view here. And that's pretty cute. Look at that little frosty thing that they can.
I like that.
Yeah. And then here we detailed the AC guys would call this a fan coil unit. The evaporator with the fans. I think the refrigeration guys like to call them unit coolers.
Unit coolers.
Does that sound right?
That's what I would call them because I'm a refrigeration guy.
And you're a refrigeration guy. Now, look at this. If you compare that S3C walk-in panel version to this, to the new installation process that the OEM would undertake for the factory installed version of the cold room control, we got the circuit board and the display module already mounted and wired inside this unit cooler.
Makes things slightly less complicated, doesn't it?
Could it,
as far as installation?
Could you also realize some time savings?
I think that would probably be measured in hours.
Possibly hours, like we say here. With, I mean, if I was doing this, I'd probably be likely to mess it up along the way, but this gets reduced chances of messing things up.
That's correct.
During the installation process. Now, you got another option. Here's the other version of the cold room control with the enclosure. Now, you can put the cold room control with the optional enclosure inside the cold room. You can put it outside the cold room. It's your choice.
Right. Whichever works better for the particular installation.
And it's also has the display module already built into it. Pretty neat.
Indeed.
So here's a comparison of the OEM factory installed CRC board and display module over here versus the CRC and the enclosure with it by your choice, either being inside the cold room if that's beneficial to you, or outside the cold room. If you've been paying attention, here's more detail on the display module, or DM. Remember, this is the newer version. Sometime back, we updated it. It is equipped with one LED indicator on top of the enclosure. Is that the LED up here?
I believe so.
Yeah. Note the button design has changed. If you're familiar with the S3C, you probably remember the older display module. I rather like the look of this new one, but some folks report back that they don't like the feel of the push buttons on the new one. They like the feel on the old one a little better. Just keep in mind, at least this thing's got buttons on it.
That's right.
I mean, it could be one of those fruit company components that's got virtual buttons.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. You got anything snide to say about fruit companies? Save that for later.
Okay, I'll save it for later. I always have something snide to say about that.
Well, here we got menu options for the display module. Let's just kind of quickly review that. You know, what's on this list? Anything from service. Defrost?
Defrost, escape, just backs you up on the menus. A set button that will select the current parameter for editing.
Yeah. And
then, of course, up and down buttons for navigation.
What it is. So if you're already familiar with the S3C case control, you're probably familiar with this.
Mm-hmm.
Now, here's some networking detail. Multiple boards connected with the BAS system, with the building automation system. This is how it might
So we said this could be a standalone,
yes.
But it can, as we said, it can connect also to the building automation system. And you can have multiples connected, but you have to use this network switch in order to do it.
And so you do it in this way.
Mm-hmm.
You still have one control per evaporator coil.
Correct. One control per evaporator coil.
And all of this was, again, like you said, originally targeted just at one coil, standalone application. And you've just got one Ethernet connection right now. I don't know if we ever change that. If you're looking at multiple coil applications, that might be better served with
that's probably a job for the S3C. The S3C is already set up for exactly that type of application. So
if you do go down this path, network connectivity expands the features of the cold room control, allowing for remote monitoring and diagnostics, firmware updates, sensor sharing, and store level coordination. If you had a cellular gateway, then you can monitor the darn thing remotely over an internet connection.
Correct.
Just as a reminder, in the next webinar on the S3C, we will discuss comm loops and other magic stuff of that ilk.
Magical electronic devices.
Magical electronic devices, absolutely.
The ones that operate because they're filled with magic smoke.
Yes, and we've got to keep that inside.
That's right. You have to keep that magic.
Yeah, you don't want to let that get out because you can't put it back in.
No.
Now, I hesitated about including this particular component. Again, if you know the S3C, you know about valve modules, and there's something worth saying here just for reference. Here is a way to also control an EEPR, that electronically controlled, electrically actuated pressure regulator, if installed in the system for those rack applications with use of the Sporlan valve module. If you're familiar with the S3C, you probably have seen this before. This combination of parts is currently being tested, and you should potentially consider it as an option for future rack applications. But as we have said before, it cannot be installed in the refrigerated space. And again, remember, the display module has that little Bluetooth radio built in it. So now wait for it. The Tech Check app. I know you've been waiting for us to talk about this. The Sporlan Tech Check app can be used to monitor and control the cold room control. It does all these neat things by transferring data between a smartphone and a connected Sporlan display module over a Bluetooth connection. And just wait, we'll do a future webinar on the entire Tech Check app procedure and cover all the options. But for now, John's going to review some of these bullet points over here on the slide. Go for it, John.
All right.
Just so very briefly.
The Tech Check app has a number of functions, things you can check up on very quickly are the unit ID, see if it's currently in refrigeration or defrost. If it's set up where you can do fan amps, defrost amps, look at your coil parameters and check the valve position as well, but only on one valve.
Gotcha.
And it also will let you know if any of the items are overridden locally or remotely.
Hey, here's something we've been, what's the word? Criticized about this in the past. It's painful for me to mention this. But I got to say, this even works with an Android phone. It really does.
Okay.
It really does. I mean, people say, yeah, not so much. They just don't know the procedure that they're supposed to use.
Okay, and that procedure
the procedure is simply involves downloading the Check app to the Android device. You then throw the Android device in the trash and go out and buy an iPhone or an iPad. Yeah, of course, I'm exaggerating a little bit. There is some additional functionality with the iPhone version as opposed to the Android, so there's some valid criticism there. And
it sounds like something we should be working on.
Yeah, maybe one day,
actually be.
Maybe one of these days we'll stop being such tight. Well, you know what I was going to say there.
I have an idea.
Yeah, and we'll spend the necessary funds to provide the programming for the Android version. But wait a minute.
Right.
What did you hear? What's going to happen? Yes, maybe we're getting ready to do that.
Have
you heard rumor to that?
Possibly we're looking. Excuse me, we're looking into that possibly.
Okay, do you have any more snide comments to make about fruit companies?
I probably I could, but I shall refrain.
Okay, fair enough. Again, we got the main screen with options here. And we had all of this stuff down at AHR, so we would love to have showed it to you if you were down there. Come by and visit with us. And in fact, we had this thing, or we had a version of this for the CRC. Didn't we have we had the CRC Training Unit down there at AHR.
It seems like we did.
Yeah. This one could expand our training capabilities and options greatly. We even have a neat one contraption like this for the S3C back here at headquarters. We could even bring these training units to you personally and potentially do some on-site training. Now, this one's got the fancy lights all illuminated.
Yes.
We just have to be careful about letting Bill Wilkin use these because what happens to him when he sends them back to us. I'm just kidding a little bit, but here's a better image of the training unit with the fancy lights turned off, which is how they'll work when they come back from Bill. I digressed here. Bill, if you're in the audience, I'm taking pot shots at you just for fun. Now, we even have an instruction bulletin for this product. Now, it's not yet published. It is available upon request. It's not on the website, so don't look there for it and don't pay attention to that date on the publication because the cold room control is not completely technically launched. But this bulletin supports the standalone version only.
Yep.
So I guess that would mean not so much that
not so much on the rack applications, not for a building automation system just yet.
We can provide this manual to anyone interested in a sample of the cold room control test. You just need to ask.
Just have to ask.
Now, this is my favorite part of the whole thing. Oh, frequently asked questions part. Was this webinar recorded? I
don't know.
I think we're even streaming.
Did we record this?
Well, I hope we did. If we did, we'll have to do it again so we can. But I have even heard that we've been broadcasting or streaming live on both Facebook and YouTube.
I think so.
That's pretty crazy.
So. And I think the little dot up at the top, the little red dot at the top of the screen, I think that means that it's
bingo.
That it's being recorded.
And you know what? We've even included a QR code over here. That would take you right to our YouTube channel.
Sporlan Video.
So you can watch all kinds of webinars that we've pre-recorded. And I think we're even thinking about sending a link out to everybody in our database with a link that would take them right to the YouTube recording when Dennis gets all of this ready to go. What an idea.
Sounds great.
Oh, here's another one. I seem to recall that Sporlan already had a cold room control. If so, what's different about that one or this one? Glad you asked, John.
We did have one.
I think we still do.
Yeah. So this one has been for sale for a few years now. We have had some significant supply chain issues with this. That's been, very much the case with a lot of electronic devices, not just in our industry, but across the board. And it is still an active product. Like I said, availability has become an issue with it, just because of those supply chain issues. So if this is something you're interested in, let's
Yeah. Sporlan sales engineer.
Let's talk about the new version.
Yep, absolutely. Oh, here's the hard hitting question right here. These are actual questions that have come to us. Can you give one good reason to not carry out all this electronic stuff? And I'll just have to say, he didn't say stuff.
Mhm.
He said something else that began with the letter S.
Mhm.
And just install good old fashioned mechanical valves. John, can you come up with a good reason to not do that?
I think there's actually several good reasons to keep the electronic controls in place. The monitoring capabilities alone are worth quite a lot. Being able to see what's going on in your cold room without having to have a technician on site, is quite a great capability. So you have those remote monitoring capabilities, and we know as we go forward, we're going to be dealing with newer refrigerants. That's one of our facts of life in our industry. And I think it's going to be a lot easier to deal with those newer refrigerants with the electronic controls in place as well.
Yeah.
And I have one more as well.
What is that?
This is just my perspective on it.
Okay, spit it out. What do you got?
Well, I looked at the calendar before I came in here.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, it's not 1975 anymore.
Oh, you would have to bring that up. But I'll tell you what.
Just an observation on my part.
But I'll tell you what, if you're hell bent on tearing it all out, we'll help you select the right legacy mechanical parts.
That's right.
Sporlan's always here to assist you with your air conditioning and refrigeration flow control needs. You can reach us by calling tech support at 636-392-3906. And I don't give those.
To be clear though, we no longer stock anything that was made in 1975.
Okay, except me. Well, I was made way before that.
I'll say you were made before then, so.
We don't give enough credit to our good tech support crew because they're humans that with lots of experience in our business with our products that are a great help. And of course, we're here 24/7 at sporlan.com. And don't forget, here's the contact information specifically for the cold room control and the S3C for the tech support when the time comes that you need help there. And then here's the commercial. Yes, this webinar was recorded. Here's where to go. And you can find all kinds of things here from tech support, product literature, training, virtual engineer, software selection, new product releases, and stay connected with us. And I got to tell you, Dennis is going to dress this all up and put it out on YouTube, and it'll show up on Facebook as well. And a big thank you to our internal team. They really make this whole thing work. Phyllis, of course, handles the invitation and sets up the webinars. Jennifer makes these slides look so very professional. I'm always impressed. Dennis edits and posts the final product out on social media. Couldn't do it without him. And Brandon, oh gosh, Brandon makes sure that we got computers at work and all things are connected. And you're my longest running shotgun partner, and I appreciate you being there. And don't forget that electronics product support team, JR, Pat, Chris, and Dwayne. That's a big team effort. We couldn't do it without all of them. And don't forget to sign up for Chili News and get all the stuff that goes along with that. Holy cow. Besides, we need more hits on that. So do it. We're counting on it. Get the latest updates and all that kind of good stuff, right?
That's right.
And with that, folks, this concludes our webinar.